My grandfather left the house as an inheritance to the whole family, and when we arrived to find out whose it was, we were shocked. So, my name's Caroline. I'm 35, I teach first grade at an elementary school, and I live just outside of Albany with my husband Eddie and our 5-year-old son, Liam. We've been in the same neighborhood for almost 7 years now. Life's been fine, I guess. Not bad. Not great. Just stable. That's kind of the best word for it. We've got a small, 2-story colonial on a quiet street with a lawn that Eddie mows religiously every Sunday. And a kitchen I always say I'm going to repaint, but never do. My days are structured. Wake up at 6:15, get Liam dressed and fed, drop him off at daycare, teach until 3:30, stop by the grocery store or Target if needed, then home in time to start dinner. Eddie works in IT and mostly keeps to himself after work, computer games, fantasy football, that kind of thing. We're not unhappy, just maybe on autopilot. No big surprises. Nothing out of the ordinary. Until Tuesday night. It was already past Liam's bedtime, and I was loading the dishwasher when my phone rang. My first instinct was to ignore it. I hate taking calls in the evening. Usually it's spam or a school parent with a weird question. But when I saw Mom on the screen, something made me answer. We don't talk often. Not because we're on bad terms or anything, but she lives in Maine and, well, we just aren't that kind of close. Her voice was strained. Not crying, but close. Your father passed, she said. Just like that. No warning. No build-up. No softening the blow. I froze, still holding a dripping spoon. I hadn't spoken to my dad in, God, 5, maybe 6 years. He wasn't abusive, not physically, but he had this way of making everything about him, like we were all orbiting his world and had to behave accordingly. He had opinions about everything, who I married, where I lived, what I named my son. And when I pushed back, when I finally told him I needed space, he didn't call. Ever again. I asked her how it happened. She said it was a stroke, in his sleep. He didn't suffer, she said. I wasn't sure if that was supposed to be comforting. Then she added, we're doing a family farewell this weekend. Everyone's coming to the house. I expect you here. It wasn't really a question. My parents still lived in the same place. This big, creaky Victorian in a tiny coastal town called Costini. It was the kind of house that always smelled like furniture polish and salt air. My sisters, Charlotte and Emma, and my brother William were all planning to be there, she said. Everyone had cleared their schedules. The thing is, I hadn't seen any of them in years, either. Not really. We talked occasionally, a few messages here and there. But when I distanced myself from Dad, the whole dynamic shifted. It was like there was an unspoken rule. If you weren't part of the inner circle, you weren't part of anything. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the phone after the call ended. Eddie came in behind me and asked what was wrong, and I told him. Just laid it out flat. He nodded, didn't say much. That's how he is. Quiet, supportive, lets me come to my own conclusions. Later that night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to decide what to do. The idea of going back to that house, of stepping into that space again, made my skin crawl a little. Not out of fear, exactly, but that old feeling of being smaller than everyone else in the room. Like no matter what you've done with your life, to them, you're still the middle child who cried at everything and never lived up to the family's expectations. But I also thought about my mom. She sounded tired. Older. Like she'd been holding everything up for too long, and something had finally slipped through her fingers. I told Eddie the next morning that I was going. Just me. He offered to come, but I said no. It felt like something I had to do alone. I left on Friday. The drive from Albany to Costini took about 6 hours, not counting the stop I made in Portsmouth for gas and to psych myself up. When I finally pulled into the gravel driveway, it felt like time hadn't moved. Same wraparound porch, same faded blue paint peeling in all the same places. Emma was already there. She was sitting on the porch steps with a glass of white wine, wearing those oversized sunglasses she always liked. She waved, but it felt mechanical. Caroline, she said, standing up. You made it. I stepped out of the car and she hugged me, but it felt like hugging a mannequin. Her perfume hit me immediately, some expensive floral thing she's probably been wearing since college. Inside, the house was louder. Charlotte was in the kitchen, directing everything like she was catering a wedding. William sat in the den with a drink already in his hand, and the news playing low on the TV. Mom looked thinner, older than I remembered. She didn't hug me, just touched my arm and said, he's upstairs. You can go up when you're ready. We weren't having a funeral. That wasn't Dad's way. He hated anything that drew attention to death. So the family farewell was just us, saying goodbye in our own time. Apparently, he'd even left instructions, written in his scrawl, about who should get what and when to take the body. No wake, no service, just this strange weekend together in a house that felt haunted by things we didn't say out loud. I went up to his room later that evening. The door was half open. He was already gone, of course. The hospice workers had done what they had to do, and he looked smaller, as if dying had shrunk him, had taken away that enormous presence he always carried. I didn't cry. I just stood there. I wanted to feel something: grief, relief, guilt, anger. But all I felt was tired. So damn tired. That night, the four of us sat around the old dining table. We drank. We ate reheated lasagna from the freezer, and for a few hours it almost felt like a normal family. Until Charlotte made a joke about how Dad would have hated the flowers in the living room, and Emma rolled her eyes and said, "He hated everything." William laughed, but I didn't. I sat there and watched them, wondering if they all felt the same weight I did, or if they had just learned to carry it better. The next morning, Mom handed me an envelope. Inside was a letter. Not a will, not a document, just a letter from Dad. One page. Mostly apologies. Some excuses. A lot of "I didn't know how to show love" kind of talk. I read it twice. Then I folded it and put it in my bag. I haven't looked at it since. I left the next day. Didn't stay for the second dinner or the family slideshow Charlotte was planning. I just needed to go. When I got home, Eddie didn't ask much. He just hugged me for a long time and let me be quiet. I didn't have any answers for him anyway. Or for myself. Maybe there aren't any. Garrett arrived in a rental Mercedes SUV, of course, even though the gravel driveway made it crunch like he was pulling up to a construction site. He stepped out wearing a fitted navy blazer, sunglasses still on even though the sun was half gone behind the pines. He greeted Mom with a stiff kiss on the cheek and a booming "Mother, you look radiant," like he was introducing her at a gala instead of attending his father's wake. Alice showed up about an hour later, dragging a suitcase with one busted wheel and her daughter Hazel clinging to her leg like a barnacle. Alice looked tired in that deep, all the way down way. Her hoodie had a coffee stain on the sleeve, and her hair was tied up in one of those buns that says, "I haven't had 10 minutes to myself in 3 days." Hazel was 6 and already sharper than half the adults in the room, taking everything in with those big, quiet eyes of hers. By that point, I was already regretting coming early. Mom, Norma, was in her element, flitting from room to room in a pearl-colored cashmere sweater and too much perfume, snapping orders like a stage manager preparing for opening night. She'd printed programs for the wake. Actual printed programs with Dad's photo on the front and a quote from some obscure Victorian poet about legacy and character. She'd also arranged for finger sandwiches and lemon water, which no one touched. That first evening, we were all in the living room trying to act like a family. Garrett talked too loudly about some quarterly meeting he crushed in Boston, bragging about how his region outperformed projections by 12%. Alice nodded along, eyes glazed over, rocking Hazel gently as she scrolled silently on her phone. I sat in the corner chair, the one with the broken spring and the cushion that pokes you if you sit wrong, watching it all unfold like a play I didn't audition for. Mom kept adjusting the framed photos on the mantel and correcting the lighting on the candles. She made us all take off our shoes at the door because she had just polished the hardwood. Garrett tried to make a toast with white wine Mom had chilling in a silver bucket, but it fell flat. He raised his glass and said, "To Dad." He was a man of principle, but Alice cut him off. "Seriously?" she said, not even looking up. "You're going to give a speech?" Garrett blinked at her. "It's called Honoring the Dead, Alice." "Right, because that's what this is about," she muttered. Mom swooped in with a forced laugh and clapped her hands. "Let's not bicker. It's a time for unity, not division. We are going to do this properly, with grace. That's what your father would have wanted." I couldn't help myself. "Are we sure about that?" He wasn't exactly into ceremonies. She turned to me slowly, that tight smile she always wore when she was holding back a scream. "Caroline, I know you had your own relationship with your father, but some of us respected him." I bit my tongue, but it stung. I caught Alice's eye, and she gave me a look. Not sympathy exactly, more like mutual understanding. She knew what it felt like to be on the outside, to be tolerated but not quite accepted. Dinner was cold ham, store-bought potato salad, and a weird broccoli casserole that no one touched. Mom set the table like we were expecting royalty, with cloth napkins folded into fans and mismatched china she claimed was a family heirloom, though I was pretty sure half of it came from estate sales. Hazel didn't say much at the table. She just pushed her peas around and whispered something into a stuffed fox she kept tucked in her lap. Alice tried to get her to eat, but gave up when Hazel asked if Grandpa was in the attic now. No one answered. Garrett dominated the conversation with stories of corporate warfare and golf trips with regional directors. Mom hung on every word, laughing like she was trying to impress a stranger and asking follow-up questions about mergers and strategy like she knew what the hell he was talking about. Alice kept glancing at the clock. I just drank my wine and tried to remember how I used to survive dinners like this when I was 17. After dessert, store-bought angel food cake cut into perfect squares, Mom brought out a binder. Tomorrow's schedule, she said, placing it in the center of the table like a sacred text. The viewing will be at 11, the readings at 1, then the family gathering here afterward. Readings? Garrett asked, frowning. I've selected some passages. Each of you will read one. I thought it would be meaningful. Alice rubbed her temples. Can we not turn this into a church play? Mom's face hardened. Alice, this is your father's farewell. I will not have it tainted by sarcasm. It's not sarcasm, Alice said. It's exhaustion. Garrett, of course, jumped in. You know, maybe if you helped out more often instead of disappearing for years, you'd have more say. Alice's fork clattered against her plate. I disappeared? Are you joking? You live in a condo in Cambridge and haven't visited since Christmas of 2019. I was working. We're all working, Garrett. Except I'm also raising a child and scraping by without a damn job because Mom thinks I'm too unstable to babysit for a few hours. Enough, Mom said sharply, her voice slicing through the air. We are not doing this here. But it was already done. The illusion had cracked. Everyone just sat there in the charged silence, like we were all waiting for someone else to make the next move. Hazel was the only one who moved, reaching for a grape with her tiny hand and chewing it slowly like she hadn't noticed the storm brewing. That night, I couldn't sleep. The guest room smelled like lavender and mothballs, and the mattress was too soft, like it was trying to swallow me. Down the hall, I could hear Alice's voice through the thin walls, calming Hazel through what must have been a nightmare. I could also hear Garrett pacing around in the room across from mine, making phone calls even at midnight, his voice low and clipped. At one point, I got up and went downstairs to get water. The house was quiet except for the faint creak of the old radiator in the corner. I paused at the living room, looked at the photos lined up on the mantel, Dad in his Navy uniform, Dad at his retirement party, Dad standing next to Garrett in a matching blazer. No pictures of me. None of Alice. I guess some things hadn't changed. I stood there for a long time, water glass in hand, just staring at those frames. And for the first time in years, I realized something. I didn't miss him. Not really. I missed the idea of him, maybe, but not the man. And somehow, that felt worse. I found the note on the second morning, tucked inside a plain white envelope that had been slipped between the pages of one of Dad's old field journals. The key was taped to the back with a single strip of yellowing Scotch tape, like he'd done it in a hurry or hadn't bothered to look for something neater. It was in his handwriting, unmistakable, sharp, slanted letters that leaned slightly to the right. Always written with a fountain pen he insisted on using long after the rest of the world switched to ballpoint. Caroline, this is the key to the safe. I'm trusting you to open it when everyone is there. No lawyers. No court. Let the family decide. The house is all that's left. Figure it out together. Dad. That was it. No instructions. No division of assets. No sentimental notes or parting words. Just the safe and the house, and this vague suggestion that this fractured, performative group of people barely holding it together under the same roof, were supposed to figure it out together. I stared at the key for a long time. It was small, black, heavy in the palm. Like it shouldn't matter, but it did. The safe was in the study, behind the bottom drawer of the file cabinet he never let anyone touch. I had seen him open it maybe twice growing up. Once when I was 10 and snuck in to ask if I could stay up past 9, and once after a hurricane knocked out the power, and he pulled out candles and a shortwave radio like he was preparing for war. I had never asked what was inside. It had always been Dad's stuff, off limits and not my business. I waited until just after breakfast. Garrett was finishing his coffee in the kitchen, scrolling through emails on his tablet, and Alice was trying to coax Hazel into putting on clean socks. I called them both into the study and told them I had something to show them. Garrett leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, and Alice dropped into Dad's cracked leather desk chair with a groan, like her bones were heavier than the rest of her. Mom hovered near the bookshelf, rearranging titles like she was staging a photo. I opened the safe slowly. The metal door creaked like it hadn't been touched in years. Inside, there wasn't much. A few old papers, a box of war medals, and one neatly folded letter with our names written across the top. Garrett, Alice, Caroline. Underneath was a single sheet of paper, a title deed for the house. That was it. I read the letter aloud. If you're reading this, I'm gone. The house is all that's left. I didn't want to be dragged through court or picked apart by strangers. You were raised here. You know what it means. You decide. Together. Do right by it, and each other. Garrett let out a sharp exhale, something between a laugh and a scoff. You've got to be kidding me. This is it. No instructions, no division of property, no executor. That's kind of the point, I said, folding the paper and setting it back on the desk. Alice was quiet. Hazel had wandered in and was tracing circles on the carpet with her toe. So he left us the house, she said softly. All of us. Together. Mom didn't say anything, just kept fiddling with the same book on the shelf like it was going to reveal something if she stared at it long enough. Garrett was already shaking his head. This is going to be a disaster. You realize that, right? We can't even agree on dinner without someone storming off. And now we're supposed to divide a house. What are you proposing? I asked, though I already knew. He stood up straight, slipping effortlessly into that clipped, corporate tone he probably used in meetings. We sell it. List it. Split the proceeds 3 ways. Simple, clean, done. Alice flinched. You want to sell the house? What else would we do with it, he said. None of us lives here. It's old, it needs work, and we could each walk away with a decent chunk of money. It's the most logical choice. Alice crossed her arms. Logical for who? I'm unemployed, Garrett. I can't afford to buy into another place. Hazel finally has her own room here. You think I want to drag her into another shoebox apartment with noisy plumbing and mold on the ceiling? It's not about want, Garrett snapped. It's about what makes sense. What makes sense, Alice said, her voice rising, is not treating the house we grew up in like it's just another asset to liquidate. Garrett turned to me then. Caroline, what about you? I hesitated. The truth was, I didn't want it. Not really. I had a life in Albany, a job, a house of my own, even if it felt too quiet sometimes. This place held memories, sure, but it also held ghosts. Every corner had echoes of silences that lasted too long, of words never said. But I also knew what it would mean to Alice if we let it go. I don't want it, I said, but I don't want to force a sale if someone else does. Garrett rolled his eyes. Fantastic. So now we're stuck in limbo because no one wants to make a hard decision. Alice stood up sharply. What if I bought you out? Both of you. He laughed. With what? Monopoly money? Alice, you're not even working. I'll figure it out, she snapped. Grants, loans, maybe a job soon. It's not impossible. It's not realistic. It's not your call, she fired back. Hazel started crying then, soft at first, then louder. The kind of cry that's more confusion than pain. Mom finally turned away from her bookshelf and scooped her up, carrying her out of the room without a word. The rest of us stood there in silence. I knew, in that moment, that whatever Dad had intended, trust, healing, a final test, it had done the opposite. It had pulled the curtain back on what we were all trying so hard to pretend wasn't there. The resentments, the bruises, the pieces of ourselves we'd hidden just well enough to pass for a family when the casseroles were served and the guests arrived. And now we had a house, and no clue what to do with it. It started with something small. Alice had misplaced her wallet and was tearing through the coat closet in the front hall, muttering under her breath while Hazel clung to her leg, asking when they were going home. Garrett, who was seated at the dining table checking his phone for the 5th time that hour, made a comment, dry and loud enough to sting. Maybe if you spent less time sulking and more time organizing your life, you wouldn't keep losing things. Alice froze with her hand still on the doorknob. She turned slowly, eyes wide but voice calm. Excuse me. Garrett didn't even look up. You heard me. I was in the kitchen, rinsing a plate, but I heard it clear. My shoulders tensed instantly. I dried my hands and walked into the hallway just in time to see Alice step closer to him, her voice now low and shaking. You want to talk about sulking? She said. Let's talk about the 3 months I spent sleeping on the floor of my apartment because I couldn't afford a bed after I left Daniel. Let's talk about how I came here crying, with Hazel barely eating, and Mom told me to take a shower and put on makeup before church so people wouldn't think there was something wrong with me. Mom, who had just emerged from the study with a tea tray, stiffened. That's not fair, she said quickly. I was trying to protect you. From what? Alice snapped. From being honest? From people finding out your daughter was drowning? I told you I was depressed. I told you I was scared I might do something awful. And you told me not to say those things out loud. That if I just got enough sleep and smiled more, things would fix themselves. Garrett threw his phone on the table with a clatter. Here we go again. God forbid we have one single family conversation that doesn't devolve into a pity party. Shut up, Garrett, I said, without even thinking. Just shut up for once. He stood up fast, chair scraping the hardwood behind him. No, I'm done pretending like I'm the crazy one for keeping it together. I'm the only normal person in this house. I have a job. I pay my own bills. I don't show up to every family gathering dragging a suitcase full of drama. You think you're better than everyone because you can afford tailored shirts and you remember birthdays. Alice shot back. You don't even know who I am anymore. You haven't asked me a real question about my life in years. Maybe because the answer is always the same, Garrett said. Still broke. Still sad. Still blaming Mom and Dad for everything. Alice turned to me then. Caroline, say something. I opened my mouth, but the words caught in my throat. I wanted to say something to defuse it, to cool the room down, to remind them that we were adults and that this wasn't helping. But I didn't know how to speak without lying, and I didn't want to lie. I don't know what to say, I admitted. I can't breathe in this house. That was the truth. The walls felt like they were closing in, like the ghosts of every unspoken thing we'd ever swallowed down were pressing against the wallpaper, making the air too heavy to move through. I looked at Mom, who was staring at the tea tray like it could teleport her somewhere else. I looked at Alice, her face flushed, hands shaking. I looked at Garrett, arms crossed, jaw clenched like he was still waiting to win something. I stepped outside, just walked out the front door without a word, down the porch steps into the cold air. I stood on the lawn and looked at the house, not as a home, but as a building, a structure, paint chipping, windows too small, the porch railing warped by years of humidity. It wasn't beautiful. It wasn't even warm. It was just old and full of things we never said. Behind me, I could hear the voices rising again, muffled through the front door. Accusations. Defenses. More of the same. I closed my eyes and wished for silence. But silence was something we didn't know how to create unless someone left the room. None of us knew how to talk to each other anymore. Not without aggression. Not without history bubbling up like oil from under the floorboards. Every sentence felt like it was hiding 5 others, every glance a weapon. The grief, the house, the years of playing a normal family. They had all cracked something open, and now we were standing knee-deep in it, pretending not to smell the rot. I stayed outside for almost an hour. I didn't want to go back in. I didn't want to be in that house, not because of the walls, but because of what lived between them. It started with the drawer in the upstairs hallway, the one under the linen cabinet that always stuck halfway and required a hard tug to open. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I was just pacing, trying to clear my head after the latest round of shouting between Garrett and Alice. I opened it absent-mindedly, expecting nothing but old dish towels or expired Band-Aids. Instead, I found a stack of envelopes, tied together with brittle twine, shoved all the way in the back behind some mothballs and a dried-out bar of lavender soap. The handwriting on the top envelope was his. My father's. Not recent. Not ancient either. My name wasn't on it. No name was. I pulled out the bundle and sat on the floor, the hallway cold against my legs. The first letter was dated July 1998. I would have been 8. It started like a journal, but wasn't. He was writing to someone, though he never said who. The words were measured but strange. He talked about dreams he was having, about how he sometimes felt like the house was trying to tell him something. He wrote about the attic door creaking open in the night, even when he knew it was latched. About lights flickering even after he changed the bulbs. It was unlike anything I'd ever heard from him. My father was logical, bordering on rigid. He never spoke of anything he couldn't measure or control. The next few letters were even more unsettling. Mentions of conversations he couldn't remember having. Of waking up in the den with no memory of how he'd gotten there. In one, he wrote, "If something happens to me, tell Caroline not to trust Norma with the house. She doesn't see it. Not like I do." I sat with that sentence for a long time. Later that night, I went into the basement. The crawl space behind the old furnace hadn't been touched in years, and the door was half blocked by a laundry basket full of broken extension cords. I dragged it out of the way and ducked down, flashlight in hand. I expected to find rusted tools, or maybe a raccoon's forgotten nest. What I found instead was a metal box with a combination lock. It looked like something he might have used at the school where he worked before retiring. I guessed the code on my 3rd try, his birth year, and the latch popped open with a dull click. Inside were 2 VHS tapes, labeled in black Sharpie. One said 1999, Caroline. The other 2006, House. I didn't watch them right away. I carried them upstairs like they were ticking. I knew Mom would never let us use the VCR in the den. It was one of the few things she still polished like a museum piece, so I waited until everyone was asleep. At 2 in the morning, I slid the 1999 Caroline tape into the VCR in the guest room TV, the one that made a whining sound when it turned on. The screen was grainy, static for a few seconds. Then there he was. My father. Except he didn't look like himself. Not the version I remembered. He looked younger, tired, and somehow afraid. His hands were clasped tight in his lap. He sat in the old office chair we'd thrown out years ago, the one with the duct tape on the armrest. "Caroline," he said, not looking at the camera right away. "If you're seeing this, I guess it means I couldn't fix things in time." He rubbed his face, looked off to the side, and then leaned in closer to the camera. "I know this is going to sound strange, but I need you to believe me. Something's wrong with this house. I don't know if it's the walls, the way it was built, or the things that happened here before we moved in. But it's not just a house. And your mother, she's part of it now. Maybe she always was." I felt my whole body go cold. He paused on the screen, like he was debating what to say next. I tried to stop it, years ago, but she wouldn't hear it. Every time I brought it up, she acted like I was losing my mind. Maybe I was, but I think she knew. I think she knows. And if you're here now, You need to be careful. The tape cut to static then. I rewound it 3 times, thinking maybe the rest had just been overwritten. But it ended there. I sat back against the bed frame, heart pounding. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I didn't tell anyone what I'd found. Garrett wouldn't believe me, and Alice had enough on her plate. Mom hummed through breakfast like nothing had happened, fussing with the toaster, wiping down the counter 3 times in a row. She wore her usual pink sweater and a string of pearls that never moved, not even when she turned too quickly. I kept looking at her, trying to see what he saw. Something buried. Something not quite right. Later, I searched the attic. I don't even know what I was looking for. Answers, maybe. But I found more instead. Behind a panel near the old rocking horse, there was a tin box filled with photos. Some were normal, family snapshots, holidays. But then there were others. My father, standing alone in the backyard at night. My father, inside the living room, staring straight into the lens, eyes hollow. One of him in the hallway, mouth open like he was mid-sentence, but there was no one else in the shot. The dates were wrong on some of them, written in the same sharp black ink, but off by months. Some photos looked like they had been taken from impossible angles, as if someone had been watching through the walls. I put the box back. I didn't know what else to do. The house felt heavier after that, like it was watching, like it had been watching all along. And I couldn't stop hearing his voice. Not the way he spoke to us when we were kids, but the one from the tape. Lower. Desperate. Protect the house from Norma. Alice was the one who insisted we check the safe again. She was convinced there had to be more, another compartment, a false bottom, something. We'd already pulled out the documents, the war medals, the deed. But she was pacing by the study window like she was waiting for a miracle to crawl out of the floorboards. There's no way this is it, she said, voice sharp. Dad had a pension. He talked about investments. He and Mom had bonds, I remember. CDs, property maybe. This house isn't the only thing. It can't be. Garrett was sitting at the desk, spinning one of the old brass paperweights in slow, agitated circles. Alice, you're doing that thing again, he said. Building castles out of rumors. There's no hidden fortune. If there was, we'd have seen it by now. Alice ignored him. She dropped to her knees in front of the safe and started pulling everything out again, more frantic this time, as if speed would reveal something we missed. I crouched beside her, watching as she tapped on the base of the safe with her knuckles. Hello. She smiled like she'd just cracked a code and pulled out the floor panel. There, stuck under the lining, was a thin envelope. She didn't even pause. Tore it open like someone might take it away if she waited a second longer. Inside was a single sheet of paper. One sentence, typed. This house will eat you if you don't move out first. Alice's face twisted as she read it, blinking hard like she couldn't make the words make sense. What the hell is that? She whispered. Garrett scoffed. A joke. A weird one. Probably Dad trying to be cryptic. He was always dramatic when he got in those moods. Alice's eyes darted between us. You think this is funny? You think he would put that in the safe as a prank? No, I said slowly, because I didn't. Not anymore. Not after the tapes. Not after the letters. I think it meant something to him. That doesn't make it real, Garrett snapped. It means he was losing it. Maybe this was dementia. Paranoia. All this cryptic stuff. It doesn't mean the house is cursed. It means he needed help. Alice was shaking now, the envelope trembling in her hand. You don't get it. You've never believed anything unless it came with a spreadsheet and a title. Garrett stood. And you believe every weird dream and spooky story if it helps you avoid responsibility. I stepped between them before the shouting could start again. Stop. They both turned to look at me. And that's when Norma walked in. She was holding a manila folder, her face pale and stiff like she'd been waiting for the exact moment to drop something. She set it down on the desk without saying a word. Garrett picked it up and flipped it open. Inside were overdue statements. Credit cards, property taxes, some utilities. The numbers didn't even look real at first. Tens of thousands, stacked across page after page. What is this? He asked slowly. Norma sat down on the edge of the couch and folded her hands. Debt. Alice moved forward, face drawn. Whose? Yours, Norma said. Ours. The family's. It's the house, mostly. I've been trying to manage it since your father passed. He stopped paying certain bills when he got sick. He never told me how bad it was. I didn't realize until after the funeral. Garrett dropped the folder on the desk. Why didn't you say anything? She didn't look at him. Because what would you have done? Written a check and flown back to Boston? Told me to sell the place while you stayed at a Marriott? You all live in different worlds now. This house was the only thing keeping us tied together. If I told you it was falling apart, you would have let it go. You lied, Alice said, voice quiet. You let us come here and fight over this place like it meant something. Like it had value. It does have value, Norma said quickly. Just not the kind you wanted. No, I said. It has weight. Not value. Not anymore. The room went still. Garrett was already pacing, hand on his forehead. So we're not just broke. We're underwater. Alice sat down heavily. Hazel's toy fox was lying on the floor beside her, forgotten. She picked it up, but didn't move. He tried to warn us, she said. Dad. That note, it wasn't a joke. He knew the house was a trap. I didn't respond. I just looked at the walls, the way the wallpaper curled slightly at the edges, the way the floor creaked in certain places, even when no one was walking. I thought of the photos I found in the attic, of the letters, of his voice on the tape, warning me to protect the house from Norma. And now here she was, holding decades of debt like it was a secret she had been keeping under her skin. No one said anything else for a long time. The air in the study felt stale, like it had been sitting still for years. Like it belonged to the house, not to us. The money was gone. The house was poisoned. And we were still pretending we knew how to live inside either. He pulled up in a white pickup truck with a company logo I didn't recognize, a clipboard tucked under one arm, and a smile that looked like it had been rehearsed in the mirror. I was sitting on the porch steps, staring at a crack in the railing, when he walked up and asked if this was the Whitmore property. Depends who's asking, I said. He introduced himself as Nathan Connolly, a developer from Ellsworth. Said he worked with a firm that specialized in respectful redevelopment of historic lots. I didn't ask what that meant, because I already had a feeling. He reached into his folder and handed me a printed offer. I scanned the top line. The number was higher than I expected. Substantially higher. It was clean, immediate. No inspections, no repairs. Just cash for the land and a promise to have the place leveled by spring. Garrett appeared within minutes. I don't know if he had been watching from the window or if he just had a sixth sense for money being discussed. He shook Nathan's hand like they were already in agreement and asked all the right questions. Zoning, timeline, earnest money. This is a good offer, he said, turning to me, his eyes already gleaming with the idea of being done with all of it. Better than I thought we'd get, honestly. Especially considering the state of things. Alice came out a few minutes later, her expression guarded. She didn't say anything, just stood behind me, arms crossed, listening. Nathan kept talking about new builds, modern cottages, lake views, and retirement buyers looking to settle down somewhere scenic. He was professional, not pushy, polished. The kind of man who knew exactly how much sentiment to sprinkle into a conversation without stepping on anyone's memories. Then Norma walked out. She didn't say hello. Didn't ask who he was. She just looked at the offer in Garrett's hands, and then at the man in the driveway, and said, flatly, no. Garrett turned, a little startled. Mom, just listen. This isn't some random lowball. This is a serious proposal. No, she repeated, voice sharper. You are not selling this house. Nathan, trying to smooth the tension, smiled politely. I completely understand if there are hesitations. I'm happy to answer any questions, ma'am. You can leave, she said, eyes locked on him. Now. He hesitated, glanced at Garrett, and then quietly walked back to his truck. We heard the engine start. Gravel crunched under the tires as he backed out and disappeared down the road. The silence afterward was thick. Garrett was the first to explode. What the hell was that? He shouted. Are you out of your mind? Do you know how rare it is to get an offer like that? No contingencies, no inspections. He was ready to cut a check today. Norma stood at the top of the porch steps, hands at her sides, but her posture was as stiff as a statue. This is your father's house. You don't sell something like that to be turned into condos or some godforsaken parking lot. Garrett let out a bitter laugh. You mean the house he spent the last 10 years writing warnings about? The one he begged us to protect ourselves from? You've been living in a shrine to a lie. Don't you dare talk about him like that, she snapped. Alice jumped in then. We're in debt, Mom. We can't keep pretending this place is a family legacy when it's more like a sinking ship. Norma looked at her like she'd been slapped. You think tearing it down is the answer? You think some stranger with a checkbook gets to erase your father's life? No one's erasing him, Alice said, trying to keep her voice calm. But we can't afford to keep it. We never could. You've been hiding that. Norma's eyes flicked to me. Caroline, you've always understood what this house means. Tell them. I wanted to. Part of me still felt the pull of it, the history, the shape of the rooms I grew up in, the old smells that hadn't changed in 30 years. But there was something else now. Something darker. The weight of the tapes. The whispers in the walls. The feeling that this place had long since stopped being ours. I don't know what it means anymore, I said. Garrett took that as victory. We're selling it, he said. I'm calling Nathan back. No, Norma said again, her voice ablaze this time. I won't allow it. You don't have a choice, Garrett shot back. You've lied. You've buried debt. You've dragged us all here to play pretend while this place rots from the inside out. I'm done being held hostage by your nostalgia. Norma looked like she might collapse or strike him. Her hands were trembling. Alice whispered, almost to herself, it's just a house. But none of us believe that anymore. It was never just a house. That was the problem. It happened in the kitchen. The light above the sink had been flickering all morning, and the window wouldn't open all the way, so the air felt trapped and heavy, thick with coffee grounds and old frustration. I was standing at the counter peeling an orange for Liam when I heard Garrett and Alice start up again in the hallway. Something about the deed, about signatures and legal authority. Their voices rising, overlapping, cutting into each other like knives dulled by years of the same fight. I told myself I would stay quiet, that I'd keep my head down and ride it out. But then Norma walked in, calm as ever, holding a dish towel like a badge of motherhood, and said something about respect. How we'd all lost it. How we were making fools of ourselves in front of Liam. And that's when something inside me just snapped. You want to talk about respect? I said, louder than I meant to. My voice echoed off the tile and startled everyone into silence. Even Liam stopped, his fingers sticky with juice, looking up at me from his chair. I turned to face them. All of them. Garrett, who looked annoyed. Alice, arms folded. Norma, frozen in the doorway like a judge waiting for someone to break the rules. We've been dancing around this for days, I said. Years, actually. Pretending we're some polite little family just going through a rough patch. But it's not a patch. It's a pattern. And I'm done pretending it didn't happen. No one moved. No one said a word. I took a breath, and then it all poured out, faster than I could contain it. You ran this house like a stage, Mom. Everything had to look right, sound right, feel right. And if something didn't fit the picture, you hid it. You hid Dad's debt. You hid his decline. You hid Alice's depression like it was some shameful secret that could be covered up with church potlucks and polite smiles. Alice looked down, blinking fast, but she didn't stop me. You told me to be the good daughter, to stay quiet, to keep the peace. So I did. I stayed quiet when I knew you were lying to us. I stayed quiet when Dad started locking himself in the den. I stayed quiet when Garrett got everything handed to him and Alice got blamed for everything she couldn't fix. I thought that was love. I thought that was what families did. I turned to Garrett. You think you're the only one holding this family together? You're not. You're the one who left first. You just did it with money and a clean suit, so no one noticed. You stopped calling unless there was paperwork involved. He didn't respond. He just stared at me, jaw clenched. And Alice, I said softer now, you didn't deserve what this house did to you. What we let happen. You were drowning, and we all pretended it was just a phase. I'm sorry. Alice's mouth trembled, but she didn't speak. She didn't need to. Then I looked at my mother. This house is not a home. It hasn't been for a long time. It's a prison made of secrets. We didn't grow up here. We survived here. And now you want us to guard it like it's some sacred relic of a man who spent his last years warning us to get out. You want us to protect a legacy that doesn't exist. Norma looked stunned, like she had finally been hit by something she couldn't deflect. Her lips parted, but no words came out. And then I heard Liam's voice behind me. Mom. I turned, and he was standing next to his chair, eyes wide, hands sticky, holding a piece of orange like he didn't know whether to eat it or drop it. I knelt down, cupped his face, and suddenly I felt like I was seeing myself at that age, confused, small, stuck in a house full of noise that never made sense. A house where silence meant survival, and shouting meant the rules had been broken. I'm sorry, baby, I whispered. You shouldn't have to see this. He didn't say anything. He just wrapped his arms around my neck and held on tight. And in that moment, everything inside me shifted. I wasn't just a daughter. I was a mother. And my son was watching. Watching how I spoke, how I moved, how I let other people speak to me. Watching what I allowed and what I didn't. I looked up at the kitchen. The chipped counters. The faded wallpaper. The broken window latch. The ghosts of every argument that had ever happened here still hanging in the air. I realized I didn't want to inherit this house. I didn't want to protect it. I didn't even want to fix it. I just wanted to leave. For him. For me. For both of us. She told us after dinner. The plates were still on the table, half cleared, silverware clinking as Alice gathered them with quiet hands. Garrett was scrolling through something on his phone, probably already back in deal-making mode, and I was helping Liam rinse his fingers in the kitchen sink when Norma called us all back into the dining room. I need to say something, she said. There was something about her voice, flat, tired, but not weak, that made us all stop moving. Even Garrett put his phone down. She didn't sit. She stood at the head of the table, her hands resting on the back of Dad's old chair like it would keep her upright. You've all spent the last few days fighting about this house, she said. Fighting about money, about loyalty, about who Dad was or wasn't. But there's something none of you know. Something I should have told you a long time ago. I felt my stomach knot before she even said it. Maybe it was the way she kept staring at the empty chair. Or maybe I already knew, somewhere deep down, that the story we'd been sold wasn't just fraying at the edges. It had never been real to begin with. She took a breath. 7 years ago, I sold a piece of land behind the house. The north plot. The wooded area your father always called the boundary. Garrett's eyebrows shot up. You sold it. She nodded, slowly. There was a buyer. A private deal. Good money. We were falling behind on bills, and your father was too proud to admit it. I thought I was helping. You didn't tell him? Alice asked, her voice sharp, incredulous. I didn't, Norma said. I signed it myself. Transferred the deed. I didn't think it would matter. He hadn't walked that land in years. But it did, I said, already piecing it together. Norma looked at me. Yes. When he found out, months later, he didn't shout. He didn't throw anything. He just stopped talking. We lived like neighbors after that. Shared a roof, shared meals, but barely said a word beyond what was necessary. Liam came and stood beside me, holding onto the hem of my sweater. I rested my hand on his head without taking my eyes off her. You let us keep thinking it was age, I said. That he was just getting withdrawn. He wouldn't let me explain, she said. I think part of him believed I'd betrayed more than land. That I'd taken something sacred without asking. And maybe I did. Garrett stood up from his chair, pacing now, his whole posture rigid. So let me get this straight. You've been keeping that secret, too? All while making us feel guilty for not cherishing this house enough. I was trying to preserve what was left, Norma said. Not the land. Not the building. The idea of it. The family. Even if it was already gone. Alice shook her head, her voice trembling. You should have told us. We spent our entire childhood thinking we were part of something solid. Like this place held us together. But it didn't. It just kept the truth out. No, I said. It kept us in. I looked around the room. The floral curtains Mom had never changed. The antique clock on the wall that never worked but still ticked when no one was near it. The worn-out wallpaper she refused to replace because your father liked it that way. None of it had ever been about us. It had all been decoration. Costume. A set built to keep a story alive long after the people in it had stopped believing. Norma didn't cry. She just looked hollow, like the thing she'd been holding in for years had finally left her, and now there was nothing filling that space. I didn't mean for it to unravel like this, she said. I wanted you to remember him as someone whole. I wanted you to believe in the life we built here. But it wasn't whole, I said. None of it was. Alice sat back down, hands in her lap. Garrett didn't say anything, just leaned against the wall, staring down at the floor like he was trying to find answers in the cracks between the boards. And me, I didn't feel angry. I felt relief. Strange, quiet relief that we'd finally stopped pretending. That the myth had finally broken. That the weight we'd all been carrying didn't belong to us anymore. There had never been a perfect family. Just people trying too hard to look like one. The air shifted on the third morning. Not in any grand, cinematic way. There was no epiphany over coffee, no group hug, no piano soundtrack in the background. It was more like the tension had finally exhausted itself. Like we had all run out of fuel for the fight. The screaming had stopped. The pacing had stopped. Garrett wasn't barking into his phone anymore, and Alice wasn't retreating to the guest room every hour to cry quietly behind closed doors. Even Norma, who had spent the previous afternoon silently scrubbing a spotless sink, was sitting still at the dining table, hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. It started with a conversation between Alice and me on the porch. Hazel was asleep upstairs. Liam was playing in the grass with sticks, building something that looked like a fence or a wall, and the two of us just sat there watching. Neither of us said anything for a while. Then she said, "You know what's crazy? I don't think I ever wanted to keep the house. I just didn't want it taken away." That struck something in me. I nodded. Yeah, it felt like giving up if we let it go. Like admitting none of it meant anything. Alice ran her finger along the porch rail, peeling back a curl of chipped paint. But it didn't mean nothing. It meant pain. It meant silence. It meant holding our breath every time someone raised their voice. I looked out at the yard. Maybe it could mean something different now. Later that night, we sat in the living room. Me, Alice, Garrett, and Norma. No one raising their voice. No one storming off. That alone felt like a small miracle. We talked. For real this time. Not about the past. Not about Dad. Just about the house. About what it was. What it could be. Garrett was the one who brought up the idea, surprisingly. He said it casually, like it had just occurred to him, but I could tell he'd been sitting with it. There's a woman I work with, he said. Her sister runs a nonprofit upstate. They convert old homes into transitional shelters for women coming out of abusive situations. Mostly small-town places that are too isolated to access the big services. She's always looking for property with enough space and some bones left in it. Alice blinked. You want to turn the house into a shelter? He shrugged. It beats letting it rot. Or watching it turn into a luxury condo with fake stone accents and a 3-car garage. I didn't speak right away. Then I said, it makes sense. There's enough room for a few families. 2 floors. Big backyard. Good privacy, Alice added. Quiet neighborhood. close enough to a clinic and a school. We all looked at Norma then. She had barely spoken that day. She stared into the fireless hearth like she was reading something in the soot. If it's going to mean something, she said, finally, then let it mean safety. Let it mean survival. No one said anything after that. We didn't need to. The paperwork took a few days. Garrett made the calls. Alice helped draft a proposal. I reached out to a friend in Albany who'd worked with domestic violence support groups. Things moved faster than I expected. Apparently properties like ours, ones that didn't need to be gutted from the inside out, were rare and valuable to organizations trying to do this kind of work. It wasn't unanimous. Not exactly. Garrett still wanted to walk away with something tangible. Alice kept going back and forth about whether she felt ready to let go. Norma spent a full afternoon in the attic, going through boxes in total silence, like she was trying to make peace with something no one else could see. But in the end, we agreed. The house would be transferred. Renovations would begin in the spring. The upstairs bedrooms would be converted into private rooms. The den into a small office. The kitchen would be opened up, the basement insulated. It would take time, but it would happen. And that was enough. We didn't fix everything. We didn't suddenly become whole. Garrett still left early, muttering about deadlines. Alice cried quietly again the night before she packed up Hazel's things. Norma didn't attend the final meeting with the nonprofit staff. She said she had a headache and stayed upstairs. But when I stood in the living room on our last evening there, Liam curled up asleep against my side, I looked around and, for the first time in my life, saw the house for what it could become. Not a shrine, not a cage, not a lie we told ourselves to feel better, but a place that might finally help someone else breathe. And maybe that was enough for all of us, or at least the best we were capable of. It came in the form of an email, not a phone call, not a conversation, not even a proper message, just an email with a subject line that read, Amendment to House Agreement. I was standing in line at the pharmacy with Liam asking if he could get gummy bears, trying to remember if we needed toothpaste, and there it was. I opened it without thinking, expecting a forwarded document or a note from the nonprofit's lawyer about scheduling. What I found instead was a statement from Garrett's personal attorney. He was backing out, not from the transfer entirely, just from the agreement we had reached. The one we had all sat down for, agreed to, even toasted over lukewarm tea in the dining room like it meant something. Garrett had decided he wanted to be bought out. Not later. Not through charity. Not as a silent partner in some noble cause. He wanted his share in cash, now. The email was clinical, full of phrases like just compensation, equitable dissolution, and protecting client interests. I called him immediately. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. And again. The third time, he picked up with a clipped, tired voice like I was the one bothering him. I don't have time to talk, Caroline, he said. You're blowing up everything we agreed to. I said, trying to keep my voice steady but already feeling the old ache build in my chest. I'm adjusting to reality, he said. We made a rushed decision. I didn't have all the financial information at the time. That land still has value. This isn't just about land and value, I said. You agreed. You sat there and said it was the right thing to do. Things change, he said. I'm not saying it can't happen eventually, but I'm not going to walk away empty-handed. You wouldn't be empty-handed, I snapped. You'd be doing something decent. For once. There was a long pause. Then he said, Don't talk to me like that. I hung up before I could say anything I'd regret. Then I texted Alice. It took her all of 6 minutes to show up at my place. Hazel in tow, both of them still in their jackets. She looked like she'd already been crying. She didn't even sit down when she came in. He's backing out, isn't he? She asked. I nodded. I knew it, she said. I knew the second he got back to Boston, he'd talk to someone, and that'd be it. He was never in this for real. Does Norma know? I asked. She will. And she did. We met at the house 2 days later. Me, Alice, and Norma. Garrett didn't come. He sent another statement through his lawyer outlining terms. Either we pay him the market value for his third, or he would petition to force a sale. That was the phrase that sat like a knife in the middle of the page. Petition to force a sale. It didn't even sound like English. It sounded like someone detonating a memory. Norma read it in silence, then set the paper down and stared out the window. He's his father's son, she said. When cornered, he reaches for control. Alice sat at the kitchen table, pale and quiet, her fingers twisting the edge of her sleeve. It's like we're back to square one. Except now we've made promises we can't keep. And we're the ones who'll have to break them, I said. The nonprofit had already begun paperwork. Volunteers had come out to assess the structure. The upstairs had been measured. Grant funds were being allocated. We told them the house would be theirs within a month. And now it was unraveling. All because Garrett wanted to cash out. I tried to call him again that night. Not to yell, not to beg, just to understand. To try, one last time, to reach the part of him that had seemed to mean it when he first suggested the idea. He answered on the second ring. I don't want to fight, he said immediately. Then don't, I replied. Just sign. He was quiet. Then, do you know what I pay for rent every month? Do you know what college is going to cost for my kids in 10 years? You don't even have kids, I said. Exactly, he said. Because I'm planning for them. I sat on the floor of the hallway and felt the walls close in again. We were finally doing something good. For someone else. And now you want to strip it down for parts. I want to survive, he said. The same way you're trying to. No, I said. That's the difference. I'm not trying to survive by stepping on the backs of people worse off than me. He didn't respond. I heard the line go dead a few seconds later. The next morning, Alice told me she was thinking of walking away. Let him have it, she said. Let him sell it. I'm tired. I can't keep fighting him and keeping Hazel afloat at the same time. Norma, strangely, didn't argue. She just stood in the kitchen and said, we can't make him care. And she was right. Whatever brief moment we'd had, whatever flicker of unity that had passed through us during those quiet hours after the decision, it was gone. It had collapsed under the weight of money, pride, fear. Like it always did. We weren't rebuilding something. We were rehearsing an illusion. And Garrett had simply stopped pretending. The last time I saw the house, it was just past 6 in the morning. Fog was clinging to the trees, soft and pale, and the front lawn was still wet with dew. I didn't go inside. I sat in the car for a few minutes with the engine running, watching the light come through the upstairs windows like breath through a cracked ribcage. I didn't cry. I didn't linger. I just put the car in gear and drove away. No one called me. No one came after me. Garrett was still negotiating with lawyers. Alice was barely speaking to either of us. Norma had retreated into a silence that I suspected she wouldn't come out of again. The house, in the end, stayed where it had always been, standing tall, pretending to be whole, even as the people inside it fell apart. I went home, to my actual home, the one with the chipped tile in the bathroom and the overstuffed bookshelf in the hallway, the one where the furniture didn't match and the walls carried only the memories I chose to make. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel like I owed anyone a phone call. I didn't write long messages trying to explain myself. I didn't reach out to patch up what had cracked open. I let it stay broken. A week later, I took Liam to the park. It was a Sunday afternoon. Bright, cold, but not bitter. He ran ahead of me, his red jacket flaring behind him like a flag, arms stretched out as he galloped through the empty field. There were birds overhead and dogs barking in the distance. But for a moment, the world felt perfectly still. I sat on a bench and watched him chase nothing at all, and it hit me, quiet and sudden. I don't live in that house anymore. I'm going to build my own. Not just a house with walls and a front door. A life. A rhythm. A place where silence means rest, not tension. Where people speak and listen. Where no one is forced to carry the weight of holding others together just to keep the floor from giving out. Liam came running up, breathless, cheeks pink from the wind, and sat beside me. Mom, he said, grinning. I made a dragon cave in the tree roots. I smiled. Show me. And I meant it.